We're fucking multiplying here. Cloning. It's against humanity. I'm just going to harvest his organs.
Creating human-animal hybrids. Dangerous shit.
Fucking English people. What are we going to do next day?
Still a thing on that. Yeah. Sorted.
The latency confused us. We were like, wait, the live stream started on the screen. No, what's it?
You'll know me, still same OG, the Anglesist.
Don't know how the fuck he got here, man. This country's so huge. Like, he'd never bump into anyone in the north.
I happen to be in the area. Yeah. So, well, let's talk about that stream.
Oh, man. So, the biggest problem we've got coming to this from the Maoist angle is that, and from Marxian perspective in general, when you're looking at things from a dialectical materialist perspective, you don't do whataboutism. You don't play around with things. You don't try and sly the truth away. So you don't soften something that is imperialist and turn around and go, well, maybe it's socialist. Like, because it gives credence to people like George Galloway, who turns around and goes, ah, yes, it is both socialist and capitalist. And in the words of Tony Blair, I am third way. And always remember that the people who openly support it and directly support it know their third way. They know their third positionist.
Also, the main core of the issue is the fact that he routinely said, "Oh, well, I don't know if it can be called just capitalist. You know, yeah, it's imperialist, but well, what's this in the middle bullshit? If you are imperialist, you are a capitalist power, and there is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That is just factually how the economic system works. Now, we can bring up examples: South China Sea, Africa, which they barely scraped upon in that discussion, and Jason did not press hard enough.
They didn't talk about the Philippines.
No, not at all.
You know, so this year, I think it was that the election in the Philippines? I think it was this year. Might have been a bit earlier. New elected fascist who is a direct descendant of was it the fascists from the 60s or the 70s? I can't remember. Direct descendant of a previous leader of Philippines. He's an extensive fascist. You know, the first country was to congratulate him on his election. I'm drooling all over myself. Congratulate him on the election. Was China. As soon as he gets elected, China congratulates him on his election. Like how the US congratulates Israeli presidents.
Fuck, man. Like, we can't be playing these fucking games. There is an answer to the question of whether China is capitalist, and the answer is yes. And we've been over this, and we shouldn't have to go over this shit again because we've done this before.
We've had to go for the nuances. I've even used the Soviet Union as an example here. So the Soviet Union is quite a complicated one. When you look at the structures of neo-feudalism, which what the Soviet Union took on post-1957, if you go down a path of petty bourgeois class supremacy within the system, and they take over with their class interests, I don't want anyone going, oh, but economically there are no petty bourgeois. Where do you think their consciousness comes from? The fact that they have money or not, or the fact that they come from a class background cemented around having that shit? What did Khrushchev first do with the Soviet Union? He organized it so that they could get in a mass amount of imported consumer goods from Eastern Europe and other nations and sell them cheap weapons. He turned it into a commodity producer, and he started importing goods that would appease the aristocracy's need for fancier and more expensive goods that aren't as utilitarian as a lot of stuff in the Soviet Union was. The Soviet Union, though, so here's the thing, it's neo-feudalist, I've said that. Now, you might think that distinctifies it from capitalism. It does not. Neo-feudalism is a form of, I guess you could say it's a form of capitalism. So feudalism and capitalism are a lot different than a lot of, like, slave society to feudalism. Slave society and feudalism, massive revolution between them. Not so much with capitalism. Yes, there was revolutions, but when you look at the system, all that happened was the bourgeoisie abused the rising proletarian struggles in feudalism, because the proletariat come to start existing in feudalism in the semi-feudal eras towards the end. And when that proletariat rose in France, The bourgeoisie took over that revolution, just how like the petty bourgeoisie tries to take over ours and puts themselves in power. They made a new capitalism is like a new era to feudalism. Socialism is not a new era to capitalism in the sense that it continues capitalism. It's a new era away from capitalism, away from it, not continuing it. So neo-feudalism is just a continuation down that bourgeois path. You look at the petty bourgeois anarchists, you look at the Soviet Union in the 60s onwards, and you'll see a consistency, large-scale commodity production, the utilization of foreign policy to export and generate capital and create an import goods economy, export export commodity system where you're constantly trying to flow capital and you're constantly integrating and assessing with empires. They have all the core functions of a capitalist system. It's just some neo-feudalism, because I mean, some neo-feudalism is like fascism. Fascism is neo-feudal. That is straight up capitalism. No one would disagree. You've got your capitalists, you've got your private property, you've got everything. Neo-feudalism in the Soviet Union is more complicated. Yes, there's no private property other than maybe small plots in farm territories, and there's no capitalist class. But the petty bourgeoisie organized and managed the society in a capitalist framework. So when we bring this back to China, and sorry for this being a long ramble, but when you bring it back to China, China is not like no capitalist, no private property. They have billionaires. Billionaires aren't just a product of capitalism. Billionaires are a product of the imperialist
Super
era
profits.
of capitalism. Super profits. Absolutely. There's the term.
Fucking globalization. We didn't have the amount of billionaires that we have today, even during the Cold War. Whilst there were some, the rate of inflation obviously is contributing to that, but also the factor of mass globalization and mass movement of production to the third world, which China is not a third world country and maybe wasn't ever a third world country, although that's more up for debate.
Countries in it are third world.
Yeah, because China is almost a world unto itself. It is a very vast civilization, but the thing,
56 nations, just to put that in perspective.
yeah, the thing is that with what he was saying, he did the fucking meme, like, oh well, like, Chinese loans aren't as quite as predatory, so like and maybe they're not fully benevolent, but like maybe we should excuse some of this stuff, and there isn't an excuse. If you are doing something from a realpolitik perspective of trying to amass countries in order to play the game of international financial warfare, that isn't at that point there is no benefit to the core country of it, because it's being used as a pawn, and its resources are being used as a pawn, because as Jason said in the video, once they default on those loans, they take land in retrospect to what was promised money-wise. So if they can't collect on the money, they collect on the land, they collect on the infrastructure that they built, and then, there's even more of a direct control over it than the US would have. Now, I'm not saying that this is a better or worse thing than the US. We shouldn't be playing games. They are both empires. Period.
But if you play the game, it doesn't end out quite well. So here's the thing. It's easy for me to explain why roads, infrastructure regarding travel and transport, respect and la salam lumpenkel, sayo sigo deo, comrades and brothers, what's it? La salam and so sigo deo to you, comrade and brother. Love and respect. So here's the thing with China. Education. That's the thing people always do. They always pull the education card. What China's doing that is, so if we're to look at this similarly, I don't know very good examples in the third world, although it has happened. I mean, there are education centers that imperialists have not directed to build, because we're not so direct. We give money and we just say that we want and need a profit off this. You must make profit, otherwise we will then cripple your economy. That's the IMF. China, they give money and they tell you how to use it. You are going to build roads, diamond mines, more higher labor production. Because here's the thing. Why are they building schools? Well, why did the English go from so when Britain formed, this was at the point when church education had basically died out. Like people were still getting educated by churches, but not like they were. They weren't getting taught all this philosophy and all this shit like that. They were just taught the Bible at this point, and not honestly. So the church education of the 400s to the 1500s has gone at this point. Like people weren't being taught like they were in Catholic British time, well, Catholic English times, because Britain didn't form until 1730. But um, the why did the British bring technical education in? And they called it specifically technical schools, so people can technically, and not in the sense of like technically as in kind of, I mean from a technical, from mechanical functioning with equipment, high skilled labor can exist in a low skill, like a low skill environment, a poor environment. So what they can do is they can use these African countries for more extensive, productive, and otherwise distributive means of resources and of land theft. And it basically gives them a more advanced capacity at using their empire to produce. They're trying to get a one up on the British. Think about how the British used India for industry production. Actually, that would be a good point.
And this is also discounting the fact that China is a member of the IMF and also does involve itself in the IMF's practices. So despite even without its own imperialism, its involvement in the IMF would also constitute an imperialist power. It is dominant in the IMF. Besides that as well, we've had talks with Maxwell on China before. It's not like the stream didn't come up for a reason, and there is a difference between having to deal with trade with Israel because there is a globalist, hegemony, and there is there is a global market, and Israel is a massive part of that market, or as I should say, the Zionist state. It does not get to lay the claim of the Jewish nation's name. But
There's no Zionism.
yeah, exactly. But what I was saying is fucking in this case, it's the biggest fucking exporter of Israel. It is one of the largest trading partners of it, and there is a difference, Max, between being one of the biggest trading partners and having to trade with it because of market forces, right? This isn't opportunism, this is assisting colonialism. And those are two different charges.
Yeah, opportunism works more when you're dealing with people who are attaining power. States, imperialist states, are innately opportunists from the get go. So to say, oh, it's just behaving opportunistically. Welcome to imperialism, baby.
And this is the thing, like you did, like you were like, oh well, they're going down a bad road. Not that they have already arrived at there since Deng Xiaoping's reformation of the government, and like we can even see it in the policy shift between Mao and Deng in the former support of the Maoist struggle in India and the complete taking away and stripping back of that.
Well, Maoists were the first people to say it. Seem to be the only people who say it. Deng Xiaoping, when we say reform the government, we mean thousands of government ministers not just lost their job, the position that they held as a representative of their people wiped out. And this was mainly affected the colonized, the non-Han regions of China. And then as soon as this started going down, so this is why we're titchy on Xinjiang. We don't like the fact that the US has made it hard to talk about it. Since the 80s, they have been abusing Xinjiang. Look at the cities where you have 70, 80% Han population because they build cities in their region and populate them while they cart people over to the coasts to work in factories because they're poor and poor people are used as fucking fodder in China. They ship them around like fucking, what's it? What would be the word?
They ship them around like cattle.
Like cattle, that's the one. Look at what Deng did to the farms. He told them either you become capitalists and you become private owners of your farmland and you privately buy the equipment from me, or I'm just taking it. And they confiscated the mechanical farm equipment of the peasants in the West. and even a lot of peasants in the east. And so of China. So like you had this massive problem of people having to, mm, do grain production with cattle and by hand, and it ended up and hand done machines and stuff, and it ended up destroying massive amounts of crops that were crop rotations that were designed around the mechanical equipment.
Yeah, and the thing is as well is that it's not just a modern thing like you're saying. I attended a speak from Mozambique, a British Muslim who was in Guantanamo Bay and wrongfully detained in Guantanamo Bay, and he met Uyghurs there. And when Guantanamo Bay opened, you may not know this, every security agency sent agents to deal with um, Muslim radicals who who were inside of Guantanamo Bay. So, the French came for the French, the Germans came for the German, and the Chinese came for the Uyghurs. And you want to know what the Uyghurs said when they were in the captivity of Americans? They said, "Alhamdulillah, thank God, I am in the hands of the Americans because they will just kill me. They won't take away my faith." This guy, Mozambique, has no fucking attachment or guide to America. He was tortured by Americans. He was tortured in Guantanamo
To
Bay.
say what he's saying is U.S. propaganda or CIA, or he's committing
Is
to what they're
fucking
doing, is
Islamophobic
disgusting.
and disgusting.
And let me tell you something about Islam. So with Islam, they are bring back the very strong importance of faith is and the mystique of Abrahamic religion. When I say mystique, I mean from mysticism, from a actual specific dialect, not the modern definition of all that crap. The proper traditional definitions of mysticism. Through that process, they bring back the very old Jewish principle of faith till death. Like you have a physical tie to that religiosity, that culture in your religion. An interesting thing to take is religiosity is a blessed term when you use it to a Jew or you use it to a Muslim. Christians don't like the term religiosity. That's something that I've noticed. Well, Western Christians in Europe, just to be clarific, they don't like religiosity, and it's because the religiosity of Islam and the religiosity of Judaism scares the reactionary fucking asses. It does. But the point I'm getting at here is that with a Muslim, they will die before you allow them to take away their culture and their faith. So when they come in there and they're saying,
Alhamdulillah, thank God, I am in the hands of an American.
because they will kill me before they take away my faith. That is because they will stand by their faith until the very end. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is an absolute important figure to the way the Islamic people look at the world. So look at this from a different perspective. This is a completely spun round situation. It's at the opposite end. It's at the position of grandeur when things are being locked in your hand. Prophet Muhammad was offered to be the king. He was offered to be given the king of the land. Just shut up about Islam and commit to the Arab paganism essentially, and commit to the Umayyad position at the time. Prophet Muhammad turns around and says, "You could stick the sun and the moon in either of my hands, and I still will not stop preaching Islam. It is till the end." And that man lived his whole life poor, from what I remember being told. I wasn't there, I couldn't tell you, but from what I've been told by Islamic brothers and sisters, Prophet Muhammad came from, peace be upon him, came from the blessing of the poor and died poor.
Yeah. And the core thing as well is what we're trying to say is that it is not down some dark path. It's already there, and it's been there for quite a fucking long time. And say oh, we can't call it just capitalist is just fucking mealy mouth shit. The truth is that it's like you acknowledge it's imperialist, and yet you have a hard term saying that, like saying it's state capitalist means it's capitalist. Like it would even make more. It wouldn't make sense in a modern context, but it would even make more sense to say that it was capitalist but not imperialist, because there have been institutions with difficult.
Yes, we're back. Professional. Please don't disconnect again. Okay. We may have lost the viewer, but I will get to what Leftism Today did say. So religion here in the US is a joke. My major city nationally has a preacher who loves Trump, has several beach houses, spends vacations on yachts, and has 2 private jets. You know, at the end of the day, like the biggest thing that really fucks over these European Christians is Jesus Christ himself. Like Christianity fucks European Christianity because as soon as you quote a rich man has less chance of going to heaven than a camel has a chance of passing through the eye of a needle, when you have literally call rich people despots and fucking dehumanizes them as people and says that the rich man can't get rich without having to oppress other people. That's where that line comes from. It comes from Christianity and the Bible, and Marxism. You know all of its one-liners. The most of them are Christian one-liners. You do know that when Marxists get angsty about like people who are religious, you all I say you all. We all speak like Christians, all of us. We got no excuse for it because we come from backgrounds that are Christian.
I mean, I am still of faith, like I am a practicing Catholic.
I'm some pan-Abrahamic mess.
No, like I mean, yeah, no, he is like I'm the practicing Catholic, in this sort of equation, but I think the clear thing is that Maxwell, at best, was softballing, and at 2 was obfuscating the actual problem. And I'm not sure which one he was doing.
At the end of the day, whataboutism was being performed. Maxwell was operating on a process of whataboutism because he's not answering any questions. He's just giving questions. It's like, okay, you're supposed to make a point on what it is. State what you think it is. Don't go, oh, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. You got more information than everyone, and you got the reasons why you think there's some faith to a nation that is an empire to stopping revisionism. Oh, there's people in the party, they could do it. No, that's not how hegemonic institutions of power work. And I can't remember which fucking Marxist talked about this because my head's a bit broken. But I'll tell you something that I remember, and I can't remember where it comes from. Marx and Engels' era. It comes from Lenin's era, but they specifically state that a revolution doesn't have to be as smashed up to go back to capitalism as capitalism has to be to go to revolution. So when you have a revolution, they don't have to smash down every construction in your state because you have enough essences of capitalism in it that they can create out of that. Capitalism does not have enough essences of socialism in it that you could do the same. That is not, no. When you go to capitalism, that is a commitment to the capital structure that is antithetical to socialism. Socialism has a problem, and it's a problem that we've not dealt with very well, although Mao's China did it better than the Soviet Union, where there's essences of capitalism in the beginning sectors of socialism, and rather than smashing those essences of capitalism, they're either allowed to exist or expanded upon, and when they're expanded upon, they destroy the constructions made in socialism that required revolution to be produced. So with China, what China is now is in a situation where it needs a revolution. The bourgeois institutions of power have been constructed. The only way to deal with them is to destroy them. They are the base to the structure of the economic and sociological means of which Chinese society is predicated upon.
And the sort of argumentation that Max brought up in the idea that oh well, like there's got to be some good people in the party. They just need to sort of take prominence. They need to become more prevalent in the basis of it. Like there's some great people in the American institutions of power. The Squad and Bernie Sanders. Like there is people seeming benevolent don't politicians seeming benevolent is suspect at best, and it doesn't substitute for revolutionary fervor by any means. And the truth is that this is not something we'll compromise on, and this isn't a personal thing, Max. Like I'm not here to say anything personally, but like the China is an empire, it is capitalist, and you should admit it. And playing these games is one, a waste of our fucking time, and two, it's you playing around with the question because there is a yes or no answer to whether China is a capitalist imperialist power, and you don't even refute much of our argumentation in general. So like, what's the score? What's the score here? Like you can't trust individual people in a party full of millionaires and billionaires to completely reform a party that has had this process of not even bourgeoisification over the past fucking 30 years. It's a different situation.
Actually, arguably, you could say since 1976.
Technically, yeah.
So, 50 years, nearly.
Almost. It's fucking ludicrous, this position.
Pop this over here, sorry.
Like.
Miss me, Pookie.
Yeah. Gross.
Thyroid problems.
Yeah, it's not great. But there is no fucking. Oh, well, maybe no. There is a clarified position, and we have discussed this with you, and yet for some reason you always find a way to come out with your confirmation bias intact.
And I mean, it comes to where arguments are hard to discuss because, like, we can discuss the preliminaries of it being capitalist, but because the U.S. has said they're doing murder, Holocaust, genocide, we can't talk about the cultural genocide. We can't describe Han colonialism properly. I hate using the word Han chauvinism. I know that back in the day, when they said the Great Han and the Great Russian Chauvinism, they're on about colonialism. But people now, I feel, use that term to soften the fact it's colonialism. I know it's just chauvinism in the sense of like social chauvinism, not colonial chauvinism, like the great Anglo chauvinism of the world.
Like Manifest Destiny.
Absolutely.
And, I think we've addressed the arguments to a decent degree, and you want to take me about the place.
Yeah, so, like, the leaving point I'd leave this on with you. Look at the world today. Look at only the imperialist nations. So, China, Britain, America, France, and Germany are tied to the hip. Spain kind of drags along behind with them as well, tied to the EU as well. So the EU and Russia. Look at these nations. How many of these nations, and which ones can you name, works their people in conditions? This is in the empire, not out in the empire's holdings, in the imperial core of that empire. Which of these nations has late 1800s, early 1900s conditions for its working class and works them essentially to death for cheap fucking wages? There's only one that I can think of. It's called China. They work their people not in just horrible factories, Maxwell. Sweatshops. Use the word.
That's what they are. And the thing is, we have too much respect for MRN and respect for you to let you get away with this shit, and the respect for the people who watch us, because we can't fucking play these salad games. It makes us look like fucking dipshits, and not even just that. You know that we have sources to back this up, and you know that we are correct in the situation, uh, but obviously being anti-sectarian, whatever that means,
We'll be dealing with
seems more
fascist
important.
imperialists.
Yeah, like you, like fuck, like that. You came off very poorly on that stream, and Chinese apology is the best word for it, because you just it's it's not even like Ho Chi Minh being in the middle of like the Sino-Soviet split. It's it's like Hoja. It's like late Hoja, like not in terms of like fucking I'm only right, but in terms of almost the opposite of like, well, we should compromise in certain cases. There is no compromise in a revolutionary situation.
One of the bad things about Hoxha in that time as well, because Hoxha rightly criticized China for like revisionism, and then was like, well,
Let's
the
do it
IMF.
worse. Let's do it fucking worse. But to end on this,
Well, to
like,
be fair, the worst came after Hoxha, but he basically Hoxha slightly engaged with them. He made small compromises, and then the leader that came after Hoxha was intentionally tried to sabotage Hoxha's legacy. They built a cult of personality around him, the previous leader to him, and a complicated mess happened with Hoxha because I feel like he went like it's like Passad light. Like he didn't go as crazy as Passad, but like the stress and the PTSD on him, I think really got to him with World War II and all that, and Tito
but
and the Soviet Union bullying him. But I wanted to get to something really quick on this. So, when people push this like, oh, it's xenophobic, and oh, they make this racist construct around trying to criticize China, and it's racist. White people crying because we're criticizing China on a socioeconomic basis. No. What this creates is a scare for black people. No, it sounds mad, but white people always try and make it out that black people are racist to Asians all the fucking time. It does happen. There is black people who are racist to Asians. Look at the situation. So Japanese people are the poor Asian communities for the most part in America, because I don't know if people know this. They were rammed into internment camps and stripped of their wealth during World War II. Anyone remember that? Do you know what the Americans went out of their way to do at that time? To make sure that people didn't attack Chinese people, and they lifted Chinese people up as an aristocracy over Japanese people. So in America, there are a lot of Chinese workers, and I'm not trying to shame them. A lot of Chinese people were abused during the construction of the railroads. Not trying to shame them, but the last century did create a disparity between Chinese and Japanese people within America, in the same way that the British made distinctions between Irish and African people in the Caribbean to prevent unity between these people in struggle.
I also do want to say I'm sad that black black M3W didn't get their questions answered, because there were some banger questions there. But
They always have bad good questions.
yeah, to leave off from my half, Max, you're being fucking silly, and and that's to put it lightly. The truth is that you aren't addressing the situation, and you're trying to play games because you've came to a position on it, and you're trying to work backwards from that position so that you don't have to call it a capitalist imperialist power, which it is.
Yeah, and to finish my point, it's like so with Africans in America, they're coming at this like, okay, well, there's a chauvinism of Chinese people against African people. I don't know if you've heard Chinese labor aristocrats and petty bourgeois people talk about African people in America, but there's some real big racism going on in that direction. Yeah, there's racism from Africans towards Asian people. I'm sure that happens. I'm sure that happens. But you know what happens more? Asian people being racist to African people because they were invited into whiteness. Genuinely, who do you think is going to act in the more racist fashion? The person who is embroidered in whiteness, or the fucker that's coming from that African struggle? And so like we got to look at it like this. Um, these African people then get associated with something that they're not doing when they're criticizing China, and they're put into a rut, and they feel like they can't express themselves because they're getting attacked from all fronts essentially. So the way I'd leave this off is that we've really got to be considerate about two great things when we're looking at this: the abuse of the 56 nations of China, Han people included, because I mean, I was speaking to a Chinese comrade on this, a Chinese American comrade, or Chinese Canadian, but Canadian American, same difference. And Chinese people, Han chauvinists, the colonialism there is even racist. I guess racist could still be the word because race is an arbitrary construct. To Han people who are dark skinned because they live, like, let's say for example, if you live near somewhere like the Gobi Desert, you are going to be dark skinned. It's melanin is just the development of like the body, not even the development. It's something that the body has, and if you live in an area like that long enough and have enough kids in an area like that long enough, eventually you will have kids that will start to darken up because melanin is just your skin tinting so the sun doesn't fucking burn you alive. That's it. That's all it is. Like, not big scary woohoo fucking crazy black man magic. It's just it's just sun protection. So
Crazy black.
I'm sorry, but that is actually how white people try and look at this shit, or they think it makes them like physically stronger but mentally weaker, and that's
Fucking
eugenics.
Voodoo
Voodoo Tantarini, fucking shit.
Santeria.
It's the Sabian magic is gonna get you. But listen to this. The 56 nations of China that are oppressed, and secondly, the people in Africa. The people in Africa are constantly being silenced by white people that want to cry because they point out that China is just as bad as the West, and not slightly less. I don't give a shit what you say. Not only are they part of the IMF, they're part of the British as well, the World Bank. Because oh yeah, that's a point I wanted to make really quickly as well. I forgot to make it earlier. Imperialism. IMF is not the only one, and they never were. The World Bank, the British, have been competing with the IMF since the IMF's founding.
John Maynard Keynes. What?
Exactly. And they have not been united. The World Bank and the IMF are competing organizations.
Yeah.
China is now another competition. The EU has their own thing, and I don't even know what the name of it is, but the EU has their own thing that's not the IMF.
Yeah.
France, that's what it is.
And all I want to say is there is no compromise. Red salute.
Yep, there is no compromise. We must stand behind the oppressed peoples of the world, the lumpen proletariat of the world. With the lumpen proletarian struggle, it's key to all of the globe. Franz Fanon's analysis was of the third world. Mao analyzed that the People's Liberation Army was loaded with lumpen proletarians from the get-go and spent most of its early years, early decade, being lumpen proletarian. I forgot to pluralize the word decades. I can't speak properly. Lumpen proletarian masses from disenfranchised peasants and proletarian groups. There is some element of people who consider themselves Marxists, socialists, and communists who seem to have the need to believe that China is genuinely on the right path. But that's the question: is they consider themselves, but are they actually? That's the question that always bugs me, because how can you support an imperial power like this? And there we go. He didn't even go into how China is apparently socialist. He just claimed it was, and then admitted a bunch of aspects of China that is undeniably capitalist. He actually tried to turn around towards the end and say that, like, yeah, it has these structures that are capitalist, but it's still imperialist. It's like, quote, you can export capitalism without it being imperialism, end quote. Midwestern Marx, idiot Pat Sark. You cannot. Export of capital is the definitive of imperialism. Read Imperialism, the whole book, is what I always you should tell people. But you know what? Tell people to just read chapter 4, Export of Capital. Just tell them to read that. Anyone who tells you, oh, it doesn't meet up with the 5 planks of imperialism should be beaten with a 2x4 plank of fucking anti-imperialism. I leave that with you, comrades, brothers, and sisters. Oh, wait. Hoja had a good quote. Let me try and find it. It applies to both this situation with China and Russia, Ukraine companies. Okay, and after that quote, I'll give you all a good old red salute and we'll be off because we got to explore Abington. It's a term related to pit mines. Anyone's wondering what I just said. You could technically, because of the way that this is linked up on the industrial areas, you could technically classify this place as coal. Quote, it is anti-Marxist to preach unity with allegedly weaker imperialism for the struggle against the stronger one under the pretext of exploiting contradictions to side with the national bourgeoisie uh, um, in order to resist the bourgeois of another country. Alger. Oh, yo, you both went for the same quote at the same time. That's fucking sick. Uh, so yeah, no, Hoja. This is what I mean. Hoja is a tragedy because like the guy had so many good points as well. But like you say, he got caught in a "I'm always right" mentality a lot of times. But his criticisms of Mao were crass and a bit disgraceful. But there were some criticisms that were correct as well within that. As so, it's kind of terrible because there was some good criticisms of Mao in his positions, but then I always feel like it was a Eurocentric thing that got up with Hoxha in that his issues with Mao. His criticisms of Deng were so fucking good. Like I love listening to Hoxha talk about Deng because when he talks about Deng, he talks about Deng like any good Marxist would, any good anti-revisionist would. I'm sorry, I repeat the part of the quote twice, but you get the idea. Yeah, no, it's good stuff. But this is the process of the way these things function. We've got to be anti-imperialism. Period. There is no middle ground on principle. Those who take a middle ground on principle have compromised on their principles and are taking the lesser action. They are committing to the worst of that engagement. There is no middle ground on principle. If you take the middle ground, you go for the you will go against the principle, which means what are you supporting? If you try and take a middle ground in imperialism, you support imperialism. I don't care if that sounds a bit too extensive. To be a third worldist, you do have to be a Maoist, so we are a bit edgy. But at the end of the day, you must be anti-imperialism or you are not truly anti-imperialist. If you're not anti-all imperialist, you're not an anti-imperialist. You are a alt-imperialist. Red salute, brothers and sisters. Stand behind the Lumpen-Prole and the proletarian struggle for the fucking freedom of all. Anti-colonialism is the process forward. Respect, brothers and sisters.